We'd been married for just 5 days when my husband disappeared. It happened on the last night of our honeymoon in Iceland. We'd spent a week exploring glaciers, black sand beaches, and waterfalls. It was perfect, almost too perfect, now that I look back on it. That night, he went out to get snacks while I stayed in our cabin with a glass of wine and a heating blanket. He never came back. At first, I thought he'd gotten lost. Then I panicked and called the local police. There were searches, interviews, even a helicopter. For a whole week, he was a missing person. Then he just reappeared. They found him 60 miles from where he'd vanished, standing in the middle of a road, barefoot and dazed. When they brought him to me, something was off immediately. He looked like him, sounded like him, but he didn't feel like him. And that's where the nightmare began. He didn't remember anything. That was the first red flag. He claimed he'd blacked out after leaving the cabin, and the next thing he remembered was waking up on a patch of ice with no idea how he got there. The doctors called it dissociative fugue, possibly brought on by stress or trauma. But we weren't under stress. We were on our honeymoon. Everything had been amazing, romantic, calm, and full of laughter. Still, I tried to believe it. I wanted to believe it. I told myself people can have breakdowns, even when things seem perfect. But when we got back home to Chicago, things just got stranger. He didn't recognize small things. Our coffee maker. His favorite brand of cereal. Even the smell of our home seemed unfamiliar to him. He brushed it off as post-trauma confusion, but how do you forget the place you've lived in for 2 years? Then came the night I caught him just standing in the hallway, staring at nothing. At 3 a.m. He said he was sleepwalking. But when I asked him what he was dreaming about, he said, the ocean. We were in Iceland. Nowhere near an ocean. And the thing is, he's terrified of water. The fear of water was something we used to joke about. My husband, a grown man who couldn't stand pools, showers longer than 5 minutes, or even dipping his toes in at the beach. He told me it stemmed from a near drowning when he was 6. I'd seen him flinch just from rainstorms. But ever since we got back, that fear? Gone. In fact, he started spending hours in the bath, lights off, no music, just lying there in silence. The first time I walked in on him, I thought he was asleep. His head was tilted back, eyes closed, and the water was completely still. But his eyes snapped open the second I stepped into the room, and he looked annoyed. Not startled. Not embarrassed. Annoyed. And then he smiled, slow and calm, like I was the intruder. I laughed it off at the time. Said something dumb about soaking too long. He smiled back, but something in that smile made my skin crawl. That night, I double-checked our front door lock 3 times before going to bed. I'd never done that before. I started noticing the smell next. Salt. It was faint at first, just a whiff on his clothes, like he'd been walking by the ocean. But we live nowhere near the coast. And we weren't eating seafood or using any new laundry detergent. I'd catch it on the pillows, the bathroom, sometimes on his skin when he leaned in to kiss me goodnight. And then there was the language. One morning, he was muttering in his sleep. I leaned closer to hear what he was saying, thinking maybe it was a bad dream. But the words weren't English. They weren't anything I recognized. They sounded rhythmic and wet, like the sound of something gurgling under pressure. When I asked him about it later, he laughed and said I must have dreamed it. Only, I recorded it. I played the audio for a friend who's a linguist. She called me back the next day, voice shaking. Said she couldn't place it, that it didn't match any known dialect or language family. And that the sounds weren't human. That was when I stopped sleeping in the same bed. I moved into the guest room and told him it was because of his sleepwalking. He didn't argue. In fact, he didn't seem to care. That was another thing. He used to be affectionate, always asking if I was okay, always touching my arm or back as he passed. Now, he was cold. Not mean. Just blank. Like he was going through the motions of being a husband, without actually being one. And then I found the notebook. It was tucked behind a stack of old cookbooks we never used. The handwriting inside was his, I was sure of it, but the entries were chilling. Page after page of symbols, strange diagrams of spirals and fish-like shapes, notes written in the same guttural language from the recording. At the back, there were sketches. Horrible sketches. One of them showed a man, his face clearly drawn to look like my husband, standing in a cave surrounded by what looked like creatures. Tall, thin, eyes like black voids. Tentacles where mouths should be. Underneath, he'd written just 3 words. They chose me. I dropped the notebook. And that night, I heard something moving around in the attic. We don't use the attic. It's cramped, dusty, and filled with old boxes from before we moved in together. Neither of us had ever had a reason to go up there, until I heard the sounds. Slow, deliberate scraping. Like something, or someone, was shifting things around, right above my room. I lay frozen in bed, heart hammering, listening to every creak. Then I heard it again, this time heavier, like a dragging thud across the wooden beams. I wanted to believe it was a raccoon. A squirrel. Anything normal. But in the morning, I found the attic door ajar. And my husband? He had dirt under his fingernails. Not the kind from the garden, black, flaky earth, like he'd been digging in ash. When I asked him what he'd been doing, he smiled and said, just cleaning things out. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Because right behind him, I saw what looked like a mark on the back of his neck. A faint, almost glowing imprint shaped like a spiral. It hadn't been there before. And when he noticed me staring, he tilted his head and whispered, soon. I stopped going to work. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't think. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that spiral, burned into the back of his neck like it had been seared there by something not human. I wanted to tell someone, anyone, but what would I even say? My husband came back from our honeymoon as a completely different person, and now he's marking himself with sea glyphs and talking in tongues? No one would believe me. So I started watching him. Closely. Quietly. And that's when I realized he wasn't sleeping. Not really. He'd lie down at night, close his eyes, and stay perfectly still for hours. But his breathing never slowed. His chest never rose and fell like it used to. Sometimes I'd glance at him in the dark and his eyes would be open, just slightly. Watching. Unblinking. One night, I got up to use the bathroom and saw him standing outside on the porch. Barefoot, shirtless, just staring up at the sky. It was raining. Hard. And he was smiling. When I opened the door to call out to him, he turned slowly, almost like he already knew I was there, and said, they're almost here. Then he walked back inside like nothing had happened. I started preparing for the worst. I bought a second phone. Hid it in the bathroom behind the tile panel. Started journaling everything in a locked file on my laptop. Timestamps, strange behavior, the notebook entries. I even installed a small camera in the hallway. I told myself it was just in case, just to feel like I had some control. But control was slipping fast, because the next morning, I found the spiral. Not on him. On me. A faint, bluish mark on my wrist. Same shape, same eerie glow. I scrubbed until my skin turned raw, but it didn't fade. I tried hiding it with a bracelet, a sleeve, anything. But it felt like it was burning from the inside out, like it had been drawn into me. That day, he made breakfast. Cheerful, humming to himself. He hadn't cooked for weeks, and suddenly he was flipping pancakes like we were newlyweds again. When I sat down, he placed the plate in front of me and said, it won't hurt, you know. When the water comes. I froze. He didn't blink, didn't smile. Then he just walked away. And I realized he wasn't waiting. He was preparing me. I made the decision that night, I had to leave. I packed a bag in silence, threw it behind the dresser, and told myself I'd wait until he left for his morning walk. He always disappeared for about 20 minutes around sunrise. No explanation, just gone. But when that morning came, he didn't leave. Instead, he sat at the kitchen table with a newspaper he never read, sipping coffee he never drank. He knew. I sat across from him, pretending to scroll on my phone, my heart pounding like a war drum. And then he spoke, calm, casual. They'll be here by tomorrow. You shouldn't go. Not yet. I didn't respond. I couldn't. That night, I locked the bedroom door and stayed awake, eyes fixed on the doorknob. At 3:17 a.m., it rattled. Just once. Then silence. The next morning, the spiral on my wrist had spread. Now it curled around my forearm, pulsing faintly under my skin. And taped to the bathroom mirror, in handwriting that wasn't mine, but looked eerily close, was a note. You were chosen too. I left that night. Didn't wait for sunrise. Didn't care about the cameras or the neighbors or the consequences. I grabbed the hidden bag, slid out the back door, and drove for hours, until my phone lost signal and the road turned to gravel. I stayed with a college friend 2 states over. Someone who didn't ask questions when I showed up pale and trembling. I didn't tell her everything. Just that I needed time. Needed distance. I had the mark looked at by a dermatologist. He called it a subdermal vascular anomaly. Said he'd never seen anything like it. It didn't respond to treatment, didn't change. Just sat there, like it was waiting. I filed a missing person report for myself, knowing it was a long shot. I changed my number, deleted all social media. I tried to erase my existence. But every night, when I close my eyes, I see water. Deep, black water. Endless and cold. And sometimes, only sometimes, I hear him. In the static of the radio. In the wind through cracked windows. Whispering the words I still don't understand. But I'm starting to feel something. Pulling. Calling. And deep down, I know. I didn't escape. I was released.